What is going on, guys? Gaston right here, and today we have rumors. We're gonna be talking about a lot of rumors, especially Canon. No Canon rumors this slide per se. Actually, we're gonna talk a little bit about Canon rumors as well. But we're gonna be talking about the rumors that have been surrounding the web about the newest releases or potential releases from Canon. We're gonna be talking about the R6 and the R5. You wanna know more about this? Right after the intro. What is going on, guys? Gaston right here, and today we're going to be talking about Canon and the rumors. And there have been a lot of rumors out there. There have been a lot of sites actually sharing information of what Canon may be up to these days. And with you, I want to actually come up with some conclusions about all these rumors, because rumors are just rumors. What? Before we start, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Canon this past year.
More camera magic for the still and movie enthusiasts.
Canon has been sleeping. Canon have been introducing cameras like, for example, the M5, which it was a camera that had a lot of problems. A lot of people liked it, but it was a camera that didn't have 4K when everyone wanted to get a Canon camera with 4K. The screen flipped up downwards, kind of like in a weird manner. And this has been what Canon has been doing for the past year, introducing cameras, crippling their system, and actually making a lot of Canon fans really unhappy and causing this, a lot of people transitioning to other systems. In this video, we are going to be talking about two cameras that have been actually rumored to be launched very, very soon. And we're talking about the Canon R5 and the R6. Kind of like Nikon Z7 and the Z6. So Canon may have under the sleeve something very similar. Now, based on the specs that I actually have right in front of me, and I'm going to be reading them because I don't want to miss any of the specs. I actually collected information from a lot of the sites. And one of the sites that I actually kept on going back and forth to confirm this information was Canon Rumor site. Now, before I was wrapping up this review, I was actually researching the Canon Rumor website, and I wanted to make sure that nothing else actually came out. And one of the things that I saw on the website at first was the following. Well, unless the whole world has conspired to troll us, this information is pretty much bang on. Any specification in bold, I consider CR3. Damn! Now, let me tell you how Canon Rumor's rating system works. CR0 stands for completely BS. You know, you cannot rely the source, you cannot rely on the information. Then we got CR1, which you're getting closer to the truth, but again, we cannot confirm the information and the source is very unreliable. Then we have CR2, when things start coming a little bit more of a real spec. And then we have CR3, which is actually fact, and that's what Canon rumors are saying. CR3 consider that fact. Now, facts can only mean one thing, and that can mean that they are getting the information straight from the source, or that they got the information from an employee that got fired.
You're fired.
And he's actually breaching the non-disclosure agreement. Now, let's talk about the latest mirrorless system that Canon had introduced briefly, because we gotta understand this. In 2018, Canon released the EOS R, which was a camera that was much awaited for a lot of us, including myself. But was a camera that actually was received with a lot of disappointment. The camera had a lot of problems. I myself got the camera and ended up actually returning the camera because I couldn't even shoot with the camera. One of the reasons why I got the camera was because the specs said that the camera had an incredible autofocus system, and in reality, you can even rely on the system to take a picture of your kids or, you know, minor things. So I returned the camera based on the false claims and waited another year until 2019, when Canon actually released a firmware update, which was the firmware update 1.4, then 1.6. And at that time, the camera was exactly what I wanted that camera to be. Still, the autofocus is not completely on par with the Sony one, but it was a camera, and it is a camera. It's actually provided me a lot of success with my photo shoot, especially with the RF lineup of lenses. Now, let's talk a little bit about the RF lineup of lenses. So, one of the greatest things that the EOS R had was the RF mount and the lenses that you can use with that mount. The RF lenses are by far one of the best lenses that I ever got the pleasure to use. And I own several of those lenses. Now, those lenses, some of them they have image stabilization, some of them they don't, like the 50 and the 85, which are two of my favorite lenses, they don't. So for those hybrid shooter that actually got the EOS R, if you don't have a stabilized lens, you're pretty much out of luck with the system. And these days it's very important to have a hybrid camera, and a lot of people like myself, even though I'm a photographer, I relied on a system that actually can shoot as good as can shoot pictures as it can do for video. So with that out of the way, we're gonna start talking about the R6. And the R6, it is the camera that is actually going to be the lower end. It's gonna be a cheaper camera, and here are the specs. It's going to feature a 20 megapixel full frame sensor. Now, 20 megapixel full frame sensor, why 20 megapixels and why not 24 or 26? There's a reason why. Probably this is going to be a camera that is going to be great for low light situations, but the other thing is that probably is not going to be a 20 megapixel, and it makes much more sense for Canon to introduce a 26 megapixel, a 24 megapixel, or maybe actually call this camera a 32 megapixel, just like the EOS R. So I'm not 100% sure that the megapixel count is accurate, so I call this one kind of like dubtious. You know, I think it's going to be more than 20 megapixel based on what Canon has done already in the past with the EOS R and their current capabilities. So let's move forward with the next feature. Finally, Canon had decided to bring the embodied image stabilization to the system, and this is something that Canon had to do. So for a fact, this one, I call it a fact, because Canon, if they don't bring embodied image stabilization, they're gonna piss even more people off. And people like myself that I rely on the embodied image stabilization for my videos, I do a lot of behind the scenes. Having a camera that you can shoot photo and you can actually shoot video, it is going to be crucial for Canon. Fuji has them, Panasonic has them, Nikon has them, and Sony has them. So why Canon didn't do this before, I don't know, but you know, I'm glad that those specs are actually starting to surface. Next feature, this camera is going to be shooting 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter and up to 20 frames per second with the electronic shutter. So this one, again, a lot of cameras are doing that. Some cameras are doing even more than that. And in 2020, if Canon doesn't release a camera that can actually do that, which by now is actually the norm, they also be shooting themselves in the foot. So I call this feature also a fact. All right, this one is very important. 4K at 60 frames per second. The EOS R has 4K already, right? But the 4K has a 1.7 crop factor. A lot of people are pissed off, including myself, shooting with a camera, especially when you buy lenses that 16 to 35 millimeter, which is an expensive lens, and not being able to get that wide focal length is actually a crime. So if Canon does not release a 4K with no crop this time, once again, Canon is gonna make a lot of people unhappy. So I think that Canon actually have figured out how to make a full readout of the sensor at 4K and at 60 frames per second. And I'm assuming that we're gonna have 24 and also we're gonna have 30 frames per second. So I consider this one a fact, and I hope this one doesn't come with a crop. All right, so this one talks about Canon introducing a new battery. So I think that Canon probably is going to introduce a new battery. It's not going to be ideal for a lot of us, like we already own a lot of batteries. The battery life on the EOS R is actually pretty decent, unless, you know, all these features are gonna require extra juice. I don't see why Canon would actually introduce a new battery. But introducing a new battery can also be an indication that all these features are actually true, because the camera is gonna demand more power to keep up with embodied image stabilization and to also process the 4K that this camera is going to have. Price. No one is talking about a set price, but based on prior releases, I think that Canon is going to price this camera anywhere between $2,300 and $2,500. I don't believe this camera is gonna be more than $2,500. Canon needs to have enough contrast between this version and the R5 version to really separate both systems. And this is all I have to share with you guys about the R6. Now we're gonna talk about the R5, and this one comes with a lot of rumors and a lot of specs. So let's start with spec number one. All right, so the first rumor or spec that I have to share with you about the R5 is going to be the megapixel count. Now, the megapixel count on this camera is set to be about 45 megapixel. And let's stop a moment and digest what we have going on with the Canon EOS R. The Canon EOS R is 31 megapixel. I shoot with the Canon. Also, I'm shooting with the 7R4, which shoots at 61 megapixel. 31 megapixel is high enough, but 45 megapixel seems to be, to me, the right amount of megapixel. Actually, if I had a Sony at 45 megapixel with the features of the 7R4, I would have picked that camera versus the 61 megapixel. There are a lot of drawbacks with the camera with high megapixels, such as especially when you're tethering and riding to the car and buffer and all that stuff. So 45 megapixel makes a lot of sense. But however, I actually got to talk to a Canon representative. I'm not gonna mention a city. That was actually 2 months ago, and this representative talked about a camera having 85 megapixel. And yes, we've heard it before, but this was actually confirmed at a photo event that I participated. It was a photo walk where Canon was actually repairing cameras. They were repairing cameras there, and they were talking about the system. And I had my EOS R with me, and started chatting with the representative, and he felt that he wanted to share some information with us. And one of the 3 things that he said was that the camera was going to have embodied image stabilization, that it was going to be an 85 megapixel, and the third one was that the camera was going to have a new battery. So it actually lines up with the things that we're hearing, and this was 2 months ago when I went to the photo event. I kept on asking for more information, but I was only able to get those 3 things: 85 megapixel, embodied image stabilization, and a new battery. Now, this camera and the rumor seems to say that this camera is going to have 45 megapixels. So perhaps we are going to see a Canon EOS R2 or EOS RS or something like that. I don't know. But again, 45 megapixel for this one seems to be a great call. Now, the next feature is pretty exciting. It said that the system is going to have 5-stop embodied image stabilization, and when paired with a lens that has also image stabilization, such as the 24 to 70mm f2.8, you're gonna get up to a stop of total image stabilization. Now, that is going to be incredible. That is going to actually be a great option for those that vlog and love to have the camera there, or those people that don't like to bring gimbal. So having a stop of image stabilization is actually crazy. So I hope that this is true, and I call this one actually a fact. Now, this next feature is pretty interesting. We mentioned before that the R6 is going to have 4K, and this one is also going to have 4K at 24, 30, at 60 frames per second, and also 120 frames per second. Now, I think the camera indeed is going to actually be able to shoot with no crop at 24, 30 frames per second. I think that we're gonna see a slight crop at 60 and an even bigger crop at 120 frames per second. So that's what I think. Now, it could also be that the camera is gonna shoot at 4K 120 for a very short amount of time, probably, I don't know, 3 minutes, a minute, something that can actually record in the buffer and then ride it to the car, or some sort of technology like that one. I don't think that the camera is gonna be able to shoot at 120 frames per second full frame, let alone have the audio and let alone have autofocus. So probably we're gonna be losing features as the frame per second increases. So probably we're gonna have, most likely, we're gonna have autofocus and tracking at 24 and 30. Probably we're not gonna have autofocus capability 60, and definitely we're gonna have no audio at 120. But again, this is my assumption. If Canon actually have figured out how to introduce all these features and give us autofocus, autofocus, tracking, and all that stuff at 120, that would actually jeopardize their cinema camera lineup. So this is the reason why I don't think they're gonna bring all the bells and whistles to the 120. And the 120 is the one that I don't think we're actually gonna see it at all. But again, I may be wrong. I call this one kind of like I'm on the fence. I don't know what to think about this one. Definitely it's gonna have 4K at 24 and 30, potentially with no crop. All right, now this one, I'm laughing because this one, I don't believe it. I don't believe it the way it sounds, at least. 8K RAW recording. And that was when I was actually starting to do my research. Before I shot this video, I went back to the website. Now, Canon rumors have retracted. It's not gonna be RAW, okay? So we're starting to get like some of the rumors and some of the CR3 facts being withdrawn, right? So 8K. Now let's talk a little bit about 8K. If the camera can indeed do 8K, let's say that it's gonna do 8K. Let's say that it does it at a crop, right? Maybe 1.5, which I don't think. I think it's gonna be like 2.5 or 3x crop. But anyway, let's say the camera can do 8K. This will be actually committing suicide and really shooting everyone that actually have bought the latest release for cinema camera, because 8K on a mirrorless camera, it is going to be something out of this world. That would put Canon on par with Red, on par with top of the line gear, and I don't think this is gonna happen. Now, some of the rumors also say that the 8K is going to be for panoramic shots, so it takes a picture, records it, and then takes another one after a while, and then takes another one. Now, I can see that happening, but definitely I don't think 8K recording, I don't think we're gonna see 8K recording uncropped with sound, with focus, and the whole 9 yards. So the 8K, if so, it is going to be something very, very stripped down and probably unusable for some of us. Now, the next rumor talks about 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and I consider this one to be a fact actually, because the technology is already out there. All they have to do is put that Wi-Fi chip inside the camera, and boom, all of a sudden we have 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. This is going to be great, especially for a camera with 45 megapixel count, to get fast transfer, and potentially we're going to get a remote tethering from the camera as well to a computer. So 5 gigahertz is a possibility, and I consider this one a fact. All right, so the next rumor talks about this camera having 2 dual card slots, and this one for a fact, it needs to happen. And like I mentioned before, it needed to happen years ago. So this one is gonna have probably an SD card and a CF Express card. It is going to be needed to actually record all the resolution from the 4K video, the 45 megapixel count, and let me stop right there and tell you a little bit of the situation that I have with the Sony 7R4. The Sony 7R4 shoots at 61 megapixel, and right into the car, even though I have 250 megabytes write speed, it's painfully slow. The buffer gets full, and a lot of the times I have to wait for the camera to really write to the car. So I think that Canon knows this, and I think that this is going to be an opportunity to introduce CFast to this mirrorless system. I think they're actually going to have 2 CFast cards, and they're probably going to ditch the SD card altogether. So I consider this one a fact, and in fact, I think it's going to be with 2 CF Express cards. What do you think? Drop your comments down below. Now, this camera also is probably going to be sharing the same battery as the R6. This is going to be a new battery, like I mentioned before. And again, we're going to need a lot of juice to actually accomplish all these new features, all that extra megapixel count, all that writing speed that this camera is going to need to really stand out and really put a dent among the competition. Now, this camera is set to be announced at CP Plus in February, and we're most likely gonna see this camera launching in July 2020. Now, let's talk about the price of the camera, and with this one, I'm actually struggling a little bit to actually pinpoint the exact price. Now, some people say that this camera is gonna be more than $5,000. I don't think that's the case. I think the camera definitely is going to be more than $3,800 and up to $5,000 for several reasons. Reason number one, this camera has to be more expensive than the R6. Also, this camera is gonna have to be more expensive than the EOS R, which was launched at $2,400 when it was first released. Bringing some of the features like I mentioned before, 4K 60 or the A-stop of image stabilization could actually let Canon to really price the camera even higher than the A9.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the reason why. I mean, whether they actually want to compete and not price the camera high to really beat up Sony in this arena and price it maybe at $4,000. That could be a possibility. Or probably they're gonna say, just, you know what? Forget about it. We're gonna price this at $5,000 because we're Canon and because we're kicking ass and no one has these features that we're introducing in this camera.
I'm the best.
Whew. All right, guys, so this is gonna be it for today. A lot of information, a lot of rumors. What do you think about the specs? What do you think about the R6? What do you think about the R5? Do you think that the specs are actually 90%, 80%? What kind of percent do you think the specs are actually truth? So if you have found this video productive, give it a thumbs up, and if you like my channel, subscribe to it and hit the notification button for more content like this one. As always, I'll see you later in the next video.